Now, I don't know how many of you remember last year around this time, I had a 2012 Chevy Cruze. It was white and it had no compression on one cylinder. I had a video up on the channel where I actually replaced the engine in that car because it was only running on 3 cylinders. Now, that car's long gone, sold it to a friend of mine, and I've actually recently acquired another one. This one is a 2013 Cruze, very similar car, 1LT, same options, whatever. 1.4 again. This one's the same thing except it's cylinder 3 that is having the misfire and having no compression. Now last time when I was having a no compression issue, I didn't even really diagnose the thing. I was like, okay, let's just pull the engine. I'll put a new one in. Is what it is, whatever. Now, but this one, since then I've kind of found that these 1.4s are common for taking a piece off of the valve, whether it be an intake or an exhaust valve. It'll just take a piece off just enough to where there's pretty much a straight hole right up into the head. So instead of just pulling the engine and replacing it, I'm actually going to be diagnosing it. So I want to pull the head on this one and then see if it is a valve. Maybe look into just changing that one valve, because that car from last year with the cylinder 4 bad compression, I still have that engine kicking around. So it's still a complete engine, has no compression in cylinder 4. So I could theoretically, my plan is pull the head off of both of them and then make one good head out of the two of them. So that's kind of my plan here. I'm hoping it works. I've never done anything like this, but we're going to see if maybe this is the cheap way to fix this issue if you have no compression. Because if I take a valve out of the other one, put it in here, and I lap it with lapping compound, and I get it to seal nice, then all you really need is gaskets and head bolts. Hopefully that's all this is going to take, but I'm no expert. Never done this. We're going to see what happens. Worst case scenario, guess I need an engine, but at the same time, between the two of them, I should be able to make one good one, theoretically. So that's kind of my plan here. So I'm going to start by just tearing this thing apart, basically. Unhook the battery, I got to charge that, and then I'll start probably pulling the intake manifold. The turbo, I'm actually going to just unbolt the 2 bolts that hold the cat to the block, and then take out all the manifold bolts, and I should be able to just slide it back far enough to get enough room. Unhook all the coolant stuff over here. Obviously the charge pipe's got to go. This coolant crossover is leaking, so I'll be getting a new one of those anyway. And then fuel rail, pull the coils, pull the valve cover. This is going to come out. Engine mount and the accessories got to come off so I can get the timing cover off. So crank pulley, water pump. Alternator I think can stay. I'll have to pull the cam actuators off. And then set this thing to top dead center and see if we can pull the head on it. So I'm going to set this up on time lapse. I've never actually dove this deep into a 1.4, never had the head off. Had the cover off, timing cover, but never had the head off. So set this up on a time lapse. I'm just going to start ripping stuff off and trying to pay attention to where everything was once. And just see where we get, I guess. see, I got the head pulled off here. There is basically all the head bolts along the strip, and then there's one on either end on this side. Left the crossover on, and yeah, it's actually not too heavy. Well, it's not really big either. And as you can see, I left the exhaust manifold on, just kind of pulled it away from the block a little bit. Just got to be careful of this coolant drain over here. But yeah, I was able to pull that away, but pretty much everything else had to come off. AC compressor had to, because there was a bracket that bolted the block and to the timing cover. Alternator, same thing, kind of sandwiched on the timing cover. So that got pulled off, crank pulley. Yeah, other than that, it's not too difficult, just a lot of things need to come off. Now, the unfortunate thing is, I was hoping to find a chunk of the valve missing, and I was pretty certain that's what it was gonna be. Now this is cylinder 3, and as you can see, all the valves actually look good. They look way different than the other ones, but that's because it wasn't firing on this cylinder properly. But yeah, there is not a missing chunk like I was hoping for. So if you come back into the car, cylinder 3, there's a big chunk missing right around there on the piston. So yeah, that's not looking too good. And now that I see this, there's heavy scoring on the walls, so I'm gonna say this bottom end's probably no good. So I'm gonna have to pull that other engine in and start ripping that one apart, and hopefully that one has a good bottom end, and then I can put this head on that engine. But yeah, we'll have to see what happens then, because that's not really repairable. So fast forward a few hours, I didn't really want to show you the time lapse pulling this one apart, because it's literally the exact same thing, just on a pallet here, and it already had the manifolds off, so it was literally just valve cover, timing cover, and the head. Now, this one has been sitting outside for a year. A couple of the valves were open, so it's a little dirty inside, but if you look, cylinder 4 was the suspect cylinder on this engine, and it's clean. If we come over to the head now, there, that's what I was expecting to see on the first one. Now this one's got a big chunk out of the valve, so that's the reason for no compression. So hopefully I can use this head, which is a good head, clean this up, put it on this engine, and then hopefully we can have a good running engine to put in that car. Well, as you saw, the head is now on the block. I did put a new head gasket in it. Before that, I cleaned it up. If you are very careful with a very sharp razor blade, you can get a lot of it off, and then go ahead and get the rest of it off with red Scotch-Brite. You can use kind of a combination of isopropyl alcohol or thinner or some sort of chemical to kind of pull it off. Another thing that works is using penetrating fluid when you're doing the razor blade. Just helps it glide along the surface and loosen some stuff up. So, new head gasket, new head bolts as well. You could probably, like, I've heard of people getting away with using the stock head bolts, but you'd hate to do a big job like this and then end up having an issue due to a stretched head bolt or something along those lines, right? So they're an extra 50, 60 bucks online. Just put a whole new set of head bolts in. The torque spec is 26 foot-pounds plus 180 degrees. I only have them torqued to the 26 foot-pounds right now. I'm gonna wait till it's in the car so it's stationary before I do the 180 degrees. And the engine is set at top dead center. There's actually a plug you can pull out of here, and then I just have an extension with a socket on it, but there is a pin in the crank that you stick in, and there is a tool that you stick in, and it holds the crank at top dead center. And then for the cams, they're actually slotted. As you can see, that one is slotted and it's offset to where like this can't rotate 180 degrees and still be in the same spot. So just get it to where they are flush with the top of the head. Find a piece of steel like I did to where it will slide in there nice. Then you know the cams are at top dead center, the crank's at top dead center. And then from there you can go ahead and start putting the timing chain and all those parts on. So just installed the camshaft sprockets, the chain, the guides, the tensioner, all that. The tensioner is just a spring in there and then this piston that comes out. So what I did to load it up, just compress it all the way, and then this will slide in once this groove over here lines up with this. You just push this in and then it holds it. And then the phasers just go on loosely, like I could still spin them. And then these still turn. These are the pickup for the cam position sensors and the actuators and the solenoids and all that. So I just left these loose and then basically just make sure that the chain is tight all the way around this side on this guide and around here, and then your tensioner will be over here, which will squeeze it all together. And then right now there's not much movement up here. So the only thing for these, this is kind of where you do need a special tool, unfortunately. This will go on, once I have the timing cover on, it'll go on and bolt down, and then you can figure out where these are supposed to be placed. So this one needs to be right there, and then it'll sit down into place. Like this one lines up nicely here, this one lines up nicely here, and then assuming that this is flush with the top of the timing cover, that's where these need to be tightened down. While the cams are top dead center, like I said before. So this is kind of the only special tool that you really do need to do this job, unless you don't loosen these off. If you don't loosen these, then you're totally fine. I have seen on Amazon you can buy a kit. It's actually fairly cheap, 40-50 bucks. I probably will end up getting it. Includes this, it includes the right locking pin for the crankshaft, and it includes the tool at the back for setting top dead center on the cams. And there's also another tool that'll go in here and lock the sprockets so that you can tighten these down real nice. So I might end up getting one of those, but for now, just make do with what you got, other than this one, unfortunately. But I'm gonna go ahead, clean up a few more gasket mating surfaces, then I can put my new timing cover gasket as well as the timing cover on.
All right, so as you saw in the time lapse, we threw the motor in. Everything seems to be all buttoned up. The cooling system's filled, new oil, new filter. Everything seems to be all good, and we're gonna turn the key right away.
Yeah, so motor's in there, obviously, like he said, intercooler all hooked up, exhaust hooked up as well, O2 sensors plugged in, V-band, and then left the valve cover off. Like I said, we did end up fully torquing the head bolts, did the extra 180 degrees that it needed. Intake back on, cooling system is not filled all the way, but it's filled enough so that I can run it and not overheat it right away. Intake back on, motor mounts all done up, water pump, accessories, belt drive, everything like that. Hook up the negative cable right away. I'm going to leave this off, unplugged, no spark. We'll crank it a few times, get some oil pressure, make sure everything sounds good. Sounds like we have compression on all 4 cylinders, and then plug that in and hopefully she'll fire. So see how this goes. Jumping in here, got the key on. We're gonna go for a few cranks. No, we're not. Okay, round 2. We got a battery there. We got some booster cables. We're gonna try this again. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. And we'll try it. Made some ugly noises at first till she got oil pressure, but it's running all right. So she's idled down, not quite up to running temperature or anything, but got a little bit of smoke coming off the exhaust, just oil and fingerprints. But it's actually sounding pretty good. I don't have any check engine lights. It's running pretty good. Let it get up to temp, fill up the coolant a little bit, and then throw the bumper back on, maybe take it for a drive. So it has now been a couple weeks since I last fixed the engine. Now, what happened was I put it in, went for a test, and then immediately I could tell that the transmission was slipping. Now, that's the problem when you buy cars like this that you can't test drive when you buy them. You're kind of just hoping that everything else drivetrain related is okay. In this case, the transmission was slipping. I actually had one from my parts car from last year, put it in here, put new fluid in it. Drives great now, not a single issue. Then I was able to go back in and test the engine, and like, it runs good, it starts good. There's no timing chain rattle, there's no upper end knock, there's no nothing. Like, it runs great. It sounds good even at the higher RPMs. When you rev it out to 5,000-6,000 RPM, it still sounds super clean. It runs good. It doesn't burn any oil. All the leaks seem to be fixed. The turbo spool's nice. It's got the right amount of power that it should have. Everything seems to be working quite well. And like I said, it's been a couple weeks since I did it, and I've put around 300 kilometers on it now. And actually everything's been going very well. I'm very impressed. This is the first time I've done anything of this caliber, and it's actually working quite well. So if you have an issue with your Cruze and you're looking at changing the head or doing any sort of head work like I did in this video, take a look and just maybe consider doing it yourself. I mean, if you buy those special tools from Amazon, I think it's 150 bucks for the special tool kit to do the timing on these cars. It's actually not a super hard job to do as long as you get the right parts, you get new head bolts, and you torque everything like you're supposed to. If this helped you out at all, drop a comment down below. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next one.